Welcome to the Texas Alliance of Energy Producers Spotlight on the Issues webinar series. I'm your host, Jason Modulin, the president of the Alliance. It is my honor to be with you today. The Texas Alliance of Energy Producers represents over 2,600 individuals and member companies that are focused on advancing independent operators and the standards of the Texas oil and gas industry. Through advocacy for smart energy and environmental policy, effective communications, and cost-saving insurance programs, the Alliance delivers for our members. I want to thank Noble Royalties for being our title sponsor today. As a leader in minerals and royalties since 1997, Noble remains committed to creative solutions for others who may be rethinking their risk tolerance. Now might be a good time to reset, rethink, and redeploy capital differently to adjust to this current market cycle. If so, we ask that you consider giving Noble Royalties a call to see if there's a solution to benefit your family or company. This year, the Alliance is celebrating our 90th anniversary. Founded in 1930 in Wichita Falls as the North Texas Oil and Gas Association, we merged with the West Central Texas Oil and Gas Association from Abilene in 2000 and expanded our focus statewide, adding members from across the state. While we celebrate our past, we are firmly focused on the future, delivering solutions for Texas independent operators. I would now like to call on our board chairman, Cy Wagner, to get us started. She is a dynamic leader, a second-generation oil producer, an Aggie petroleum engineer who was at the helm of her family's 40-year oil and gas business in Fort Worth. Cy, would you make a few remarks?
Thank you, Jason. On behalf of the board and the membership of the Texas Alliance of Energy Producers, I'd like to welcome Commissioner Christian and all of our viewers today. Commissioner, what an honor and privilege to have you with us. As an independent operator myself, and on behalf of all the members of our organization that work to fuel our economy, here in Texas and the world, thank you for your many efforts on our behalf. Your leadership at the Railroad Commission has led our industry through a tough year, to say the least, and we're glad to support your efforts. The Alliance is proud to work alongside you to represent the small independent operators, service companies, as well as the large publicly traded entities that our membership entails. We represent the voice of the oil and gas industry in Texas, and we appreciate your inclusion of our organization in your efforts to create sound, science-based regulation for our industry. Thank you to our board and members for joining in today. We look forward to seeing you again soon in our next spotlight on the issues. We're going to continue to bring great events like this virtually for the time being, and we look forward to keeping you updated on issues facing each of us and our businesses. As always, thank you to Jason and the rest of the Alliance staff for your work in bringing this event to our members. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you, Cy, for your leadership, and thanks to our board members for joining us today. I saw a number of them: Brian Miller, Jim Tremuto, Jonathan McCartney, and Stan Valdez, two of our newest board members. Thank you very much for attending today. I'd now like to introduce Commissioner Christian, a lifelong conservative businessman. Wayne Christian was elected as our 50th Texas Railroad Commissioner in November 2016. In June of last year, his two fellow railroad commissioners elected him chairman of the Railroad Commission, where he served during a challenging time for the agency and our industry throughout this past year. Commissioner Christian was appointed by Governor Greg Abbott to the Interstate Oil and Gas Compact Commission, the IOGCC, as the official representative of Texas. This organization is one of the oldest and largest interstate compacts in the nation, formed over 80 years ago when several states came together to resolve common issues in the industry without federal intervention. Prior to his time at the commission, Christian served 7 sessions in the Texas House of Representatives, accumulating a strong record of standing for free markets and against burdensome regulations. He graduated from high school as valedictorian and went on to graduate from Stephen F. Austin University with a degree in general business. After college, he found success in the music industry with his country gospel band, the Mercy River Boys, and went on to be a finalist for the Grammy Award in 1979. If you would like to submit a question to Commissioner Christian, please utilize the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. We will go till about 10:30 and wrap up with a few audience questions. Commissioner, welcome. Thank you for participating in our Spotlight on the Issues series. How was your Thanksgiving?
Very good. Had 4 grandkids that were playing circles around me, so it's always just a blessing to get family together and be thankful for what we had.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, congratulations on your recent election as IOGCC's vice chairman. Can you tell our members more about this organization?
Yeah, the organization has been around for about 80 plus years. And it's the 31 states in the United States that produce oil and gas, plus Canada, several of the provinces there. So it's busy to, its goal originally has been and consistently has been to keep as much control as possible to the states versus the federal government, which is right down the line of what I believe. And so it's a organization that is mostly made up of the regulators from every state in Canada. There's only two representatives there that are elected by statewide, and that's Texas and Oklahoma, which is very interesting and really lets you realize how Texas and Oklahoma, but the Texas Railroad Commission stands a little bit more independent as most other regulators across the United States. And so it's interesting to see while all the other oil and gas regulators from the other states have to go home and beg somebody, can they, mother, may I? We have a lot of independence from Texas and Oklahoma to be able to control things, which I think is a great defense against some of the upcoming threats.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right about the importance of state level regulation, because one size solutions out of Washington frequently get it wrong with those trade-offs. We've seen some bad ideas in New York and Colorado become law, whether it's denying pipelines or limiting hydraulic fracturing, and that just condemns billions in mineral rights. Tell us more about how you've worked with these other 31 states to push back against some of those bad ideas.
Well, of course, I'm one that believes that we need to stand up and fight for what we believe. When Governor Abbott was kind enough to appoint me to the IOGCC back in 2017, I went there and found out that they had many times set back, and of course they were, a lot of them were just the regulators for the states and weren't really active in fighting against the threats I believe that were on the horizon for oil and gas. And so being the hard-headed Texan that I'm proud to be, I'm glad to say that we now have Lori Rottenberry, who used to be the oil and gas director for the Railroad Commission of Texas, is now the executive director there. My chief of staff, Travis McCormick, is the vice president for public relations and communications, which controlling the messaging coming from IOGCC. And my being able to step there as first vice president, we have the ability now to coordinate together the fights that I believe we need to take to the federal government and speak for the 31 states and Canada on different issues. I'll give you an example, some resolutions that I've authored and passed. One was a resolution that asked the federal government and the administration to move as many regulations and as many authorities back to the states they possibly could during the Trump administration. And so while we had this window of opportunity, and such as the NPDES, the water regulation, to have the states be able to have more authority rather than the federal government. Another was a resolution that was quite controversial at the time and went back to the governors for approval, but I was successful in passing one that says that we as the 31 states are against the new Green Deal, the Green New Deal, and anything that looks like the Green New Deal. And so we took a stance there against the Green New Deal. The other, we made a resolution, I authored one that was against oil dumping, where Saudi Arabia and Russia were dumping oil on here right after the agreement that we're all familiar with. ESG, right now, I have a resolution that we're debating there that I've presented against ESG funding. That's environmental, social, and governance funds that people like the Rockefeller family, odd group to be fighting it in New York, are trying to cut off all the financing and funding they possibly can to oil and gas industry. So these are some of the battles that I'm working on and trying to get the IOGCC to approach our federal government to try to stop.
Well, those are really good, and you bring up a great point about the Trump administration that's really been a friend and an ally for oil and gas these past 4 years. But unfortunately, it looks like we'll have a new administration in January. And while we don't know all of Biden's proposed cabinet picks, early reports are this may be a return to the Obama administration's approach: heavy regulatory proposals, countless court battles, antagonistic foreign policy, and new subsidies for competing energy sources. If the Senate holds Republican, what are your thoughts on this next administration?
Well, I pray the Senate holds Republicans. That's kind of the key to keeping us from falling off the cliff of a catastrophe. But there's nothing few things really good about changing from the administration we currently have, because Vice President Biden has already announced John Kerry with $2 trillion to come as the environmental czar to fight us, to try to shut down oil and gas production. He is told clearly that he, long-term, is aimed at stopping oil and gas production totally in the United States. And we're talking about killing jobs, increasing the cost to the consumer, to all businesses, and more importantly, national security. The book The Prize talked about since 1850, every major worldwide war had basically been around access to energy. And what I think a lot of people don't understand is this ability we've had in the last just few years to have energy dominance, energy independence, is not only economic security, energy security, but it's national security. And most important, our young men and women no longer have to go overseas to defend our access to the Persian Gulf and to oil in the Mideast. They no longer have to. That's national security. And all of this is at risk with this new administration. Chambers of Commerce has said that there's 3.2 million jobs that will be lost if we shut this down. And that's $11.5 trillion in gross domestic production that we're going to give up if we shut down. That's $2,500 per family. That's $116 billion in Texas taxes alone. We give up $116 billion just in Texas per year. And we also, the rainy day fund is totally oil and gas. So the other part that's just quite an oxymoron to me is most of this is based around this religious fever of that oil and gas is destroying the environment of the world with this environmental doom. The fact is, if they really wanted to clean the environment of the world up, the cleanest industrial country on planet Earth is the United States. And what you're doing is you're taking away the cleanest country, and it'll be the production of oil and gas will be replaced by the dirtier countries around the world. So it's a form of insanity on logic. But again, that's the fight I think we have before us.
Well, and we're glad you're in that fight. You served as chairman during a critically important time for the commission and the industry. The Texas Petro Index showed a decline starting in 2019, but then was in free fall on April 20th of this year because of COVID and that foolish price war that you had that great resolution on dumping about. Through it all, you worked to put the commission and the industry in a better position coming out of these challenging times with some needed regulatory relief measures and the appointment of the Blue Ribbon Task Force on Economic Recovery. So I just want to thank you for your leadership and your work to incorporate further recommendations from the task force. But I wondered if we'd talk about that 10-hour plus hearing that the world watched on proration and whether the commission would implement production controls on a statewide basis. Give us some behind the scenes, how you assess the capabilities of the agency to implement those controls and whether that might come up in the future.
Well, yeah, my philosophy on government and where the Railroad Commission should step in and what I turn to is the free market as much as possible. I think the government does things less efficient in almost in every venue than does the free market private industry. And our job is to protect the public and to make sure and regulate and watch and punish the bad guys and let the good folks, which are the vast majority of producers and citizens out there, do their thing, drill baby drill, in a safe, clean manner. I think Bob McEwen was a former congressman. I think he presents my view on the role of government better than anybody. He talks about as an old guy in banking and financial services. There's first party money, second party money, third party money. First party money where it's my money and I'm going to use what I buy. So I'm very concerned both about the price and the quality and the cheapness of what I'm buying. So there's second party money where it's my money, but I'm not going to use what I buy, such as a gift for Aunt Sadie at Christmas time. If the scarf is an odd color, I really don't care as long as I paid cheap dollars for it because I'm not using it. Third party money is money that's not mine, so I'm not concerned about the price, and I'm not going to use directly what I buy. So I'm not concerned about the price of it or the quality of it or quantity, anything. So the truth is government purchases, every one of them is a third party purchase. And so it's always best to have somebody that cares, like the private industry that's involved, that has their own money at risk and is looking to their own profits and own products, or what's going to happen. Because every time government does, it's not their money, they're not going to directly own what they do. And so there's less concern for price, there's less concern for quality and efficiency.
Well, that's absolutely right. But you did put us to work, these GR folks, and you charged the task force to come together and work with a broad coalition of industry to find ways to reduce flaring. And we appreciate the open door you have extended to the Texas Methane and Flaring Coalition. Both you and staff at the agency have been phenomenal to work with to find solutions without costly government intervention, and really to champion private sector innovation to implement market-based solutions. So we've given you some recommendations. You've implemented some. Are we on the right track, or would you like to see things change a little bit?
Yeah, I think we're on the right direction. Of course, change is consistent. We need to adjust every day to what happens in the field, what technology brings us, and it's harder to turn the ship in any direction. The industry itself, it's hard to turn, but that's the part that we need to work together. You mentioned the hearing we had. It was a very interesting time. We were looking, of course, at that particular moment, just kind of go back on that. We had 30 different thousand participants on that conference for 10 and a half hours, 86 countries, 49 states. And at that hearing, it became quite evident some wanted us to prorate the price of oil and gas during that downturn. I looked at that and I called several of my friends at the IOGCC and said, Texas doesn't need to act alone in doing this. So I called several other states producers, Oklahoma, North Dakota, Pennsylvania, other states, and they had no intent. Called Canada, and the Minister of Canada, Energy in Canada, had no intent of proration. So Texas would have been alone in that. And that's when I came back to my decision that we needed to have the private industry involved. And that's where you mentioned the Blue Ribbon Task Force that asked your organization and many others and shareholders, every group we could, to come together and come up with answers to that problem. And I'm glad to say that the private industry and shareholders, citizens out there, came up with, I think, 31 recommendations of which we've implemented. Now, they're being implemented right now. For example, the environmental organizations, by the way, are suing us to stop the implementation we did to release some of the emergency orders that we did at the recommendation of the industry. So that shows you the fight right now that we have against those that are against oil and gas. Just put a federal administration behind that. So already we have lawsuits without a Biden administration going into place when we try to release regulations on the industry. I just multiply that many times over. As far as flaring, where I really saw that as a problem was not as much. Now, indeed, we want to be clean and we want to be efficient, not to waste natural gas. But frankly, the industry was doing a relatively good job. The highest percentage of the production that I saw in the past that we were flaring of total gas produced in the state of Texas was 1.7%. And because of the decrease in the demand and the decrease in production, we're down to under 0.5% currently on flaring gas that's being produced. That's a lot of gas. We don't want to waste any of it, but I honestly believe that the market itself will correct a lot of that long term. The problem we were having with flaring was that back to Wall Street, you were seeing pictures, and the environmental extremists were using the pictures of flaring as polluting the environment, wasting all this, and there were pictures all over the TV screens and everywhere. And so they were using it on Wall Street and in major banks to stop funding to our industry. And that was and is slowing or preventing our companies from coming back, causing a lot of merging togethers, causing maybe some sellouts to international companies. And I visited with the Department of Energy, and my concern was, if pharmaceuticals, we had proven that it is a national security measure that we're losing production of our pharmaceuticals overseas, if we sell off the control of a large portion of our Texas basins and oil and gas properties to multinational corporations, then it's a national security item, because they can then decide we want to increase production overseas versus from the state of Texas. And so with that, I've been working with the Department of Energy during all this, with our task force, and it's a fight we continue to watch very closely.
Oh, that's good. I wanted to ask you about this past election. Millions of out-of-state dollars were spent against Jim Wright with little effect, but Republicans below the president held back the blue wave. But it's clear that national Democrats and out-of-state environmentalists have their sights set on Texas. You also recently announced for re-election and will be on the ballot in 2022. So how can we help?
Well, of course, politics boils down in many cases to money, and contributions are valuable. Our cutoff date is December the 12th. So any dollars out there would be most appreciated. But frankly, I think we need to understand the war, the battle that we're in. I think we've taken for granted that oil and gas, we're just going to be able to produce it, sell it from now on. And I think we as an industry, there was an article in some magazine that said the top 10 enemies to oil and gas, and number one was the oil and gas industry. We have set back on our laurels and allowed the Al Gores and AOCs of the world to dilute the truth, which is a mild statement. In fact, totally lie about some things. I mean, Barack Obama was a president that tried to shut down oil and gas, has announced that the seas are going to overtake the world. And yet he just a year ago bought a $13.5 million sea level mansion. And the new energy czar, John Kerry, owns an island at sea level, flying around in his Learjets and big jets. And so there's such hypocrisy in the movement. But we as an industry have sit back and not even fought the battle. We must come together as an industry. I mean, why should I try to regulate for the benefit of the oil and gas industry, and when the industry itself are surrendering or not even on the field playing a battle? So I believe messaging needs to come together. I'm working with Alex Epstein, who wrote The Moral Case for Fossil Fuel, is having a weekly conference with legislators that I've worked with him. We've started having a monthly conference call, a weekly conference call for those legislators federally and state and governors. And we're trying to get the message of how we come together with a message to combat this environmental fraud that's been brought as a religion in our current environment. So those battles are important. So the way people can help me is that I'm concerned about not having enough dollars to scare off a primary opponent, which is a burning of dollars prior to the big fight that is, as Jim Wright found. Over $3.5 million was given just by one person, Mr. Bloomberg, out of New York City, to get oil and gas control in the state of Texas and keep it in the ground or sitting on the Railroad Commission of Texas, which would be devastating. The other thing was some of the technical Silicon Valley folks put up over $100 million behind this race. And they're big dollars because nationally, these folks know that if they shut Texas down, because we have less public lands than most any other state, we have the largest amount of gas and oil of any state in the nation. We're 40% of the current production. And frankly, if Biden starts shutting down public land, since we have less of it, Texas will be even a larger percentage of production in the United States. And so this is the fight that I see before us. And it's the battle I want to fight, but because my friend Louis Gohmert, who is a congressman here in my neck of the woods, said, Christian, you only get shot at if you raise your head up. And frankly, I'm pretty good at raising my head up and fighting. And to do that, I'll have a lot of opposition coming from those folks that Jim Wright saw this time, but it'll be even stronger, I believe, with Biden able to draw more and more money in. So any help, my website is christianfortexas.com, just christianfortexas.com and /donate. And we will appreciate any money we can before that December 12th date.
Yes, sir. We're committed to help. What is your outlook, energy outlook, I guess, for next year and then this upcoming legislative session?
Well, of course, the energy outlook is I think we're in recovery. It's just how healthy a recovery are we going to have? Again, Texas, because of our basic independence of less federal properties, I don't think, just like the first Biden administration tried everything they could to shut down oil and gas during the Obama-Biden administration. And yet, as Rick Perry said in his one time in a statement, that with the anemic gross national product during the 8 years of the Obama administration was a 0.8% per year gross domestic product. Had it not been for the state of Texas, it would have been a negative number. Right. So we bailed the first Biden administration's fiscal rear end out during that time. And I think Texas stands. In fact, we developed the shale play, the horizontal drilling. All of this was developed during an administration that tried to shut down all the production from Texas. But as independent as we have been, it'll be a vast amount of lawsuits continue, just like right now we're facing lawsuits from the environmentalists over the emergency orders that the task force suggested that we implement at the Railroad Commission. That means the Attorney General will play a great part going forward of fighting the battles as we as Texans try to continue the oil and gas production that we have. And now that we have the export capacity that we didn't have during the last time, it'll be more important that we produce more. So you're talking about the 40% we currently produce will increase potentially to what, 50, 60, 70% of the United States production of oil and gas. So it's very important we as Texans are ready to fight this fight. And that's why the guns will be aimed on us directly from Washington and the environmental extremists. And we must come together as an industry. Second, during the session, what I look to is, of course, number one is financing. And Chairman Craddock now is taking on that battle, leading that battle, and we'll all be assisting, of course, to make our legislators realize how important oil and gas is to Texas. And for every dollar they fund the Railroad Commission, the amount the state of Texas gets back, it's not like the Highway Department, the public education, or law enforcement where they are needed, but their energy cost, a dollar cost to the state budget. The Railroad Commission of Texas returns $51 for every dollar they fund the Railroad Commission of Texas. We're all of the rainy day fund. We're $116 billion in taxes. And the legislature needs to realize this, and not just from the politicians at the railroad chairman. We need you in the industry to start advising them of how important oil and gas is. Legislators don't move many times unless they are encouraged by their constituents. And encouragement from constituents. And basically my presentation that I intend to make before the legislature and the committees where we report is the fact that we have a decision to make. And we have not made this decision in the past. Do we intend to fight and defend oil and gas? Are we going to continue to lose the battle that we are currently losing for the destruction of the oil and gas industry? Unless we come together and start fighting both as government and as industry, I'm sorry, the path we're on is total shut it down, keep it in the ground.
Well, and you've taken that fight to our schools as well with making sure that TEA adopts pro-energy and pro-oil and gas educational curriculum. Thank you for that. Any update on that front that we can share with members?
Yeah, Jason Isaac, of course, while he was in the legislature, he now works with Texas Public Policy Foundation, fighting for our cause. But Jason passed a curriculum that has been approved by the Education Board and is available to be taught in our public schools. So there is an energy curriculum. Problem is, each individual school district has its curriculum director that must approve those optional courses. So that's back to local control. Are we advocating? Has anybody even addressed the school board in your local community? Are we as an industry telling the public schools across here, our members all across the state, to talk to their superintendents and to their school board members to make sure we get that energy curricula in there? That we need to do. We also are sitting here. I had a task force another task force I had was on employees and how we get more employees in the industry, because we were at a shortage prior to the downturn of about 40,000 needed employees, from petroleum engineers to truck drivers across the industry. And frankly, the estimation on a rebound is about 50,000. Mm-hmm. So for those purposes, we need to retrain workers that have been in the industry, because there's going to be new technologies, new artificial intelligence methods are going to be very different of doing business in a lot of areas of oil and gas. And I've started one pilot program at my home area here in Deep East Texas that we've been working, and we've got a campus. We've got sponsorship by our local university, and it's for an energy school in rural Texas because there's a lot of available people who need jobs in underserved rural America. And I've been working with the Department of Energy. I've been working with the Opportunity Zone folks that Scott Turner leads in Washington, D.C., taking Opportunity Zone capital gains dollars that normally are sent to Uncle Sam can be used to fund Opportunity Zones. That's why they're so important. And I'm trying to put together a program here as an example for the rest of the state to come into rural Texas and train workers for the energy field. And I think that's a resource we need to use. And that's kind of a project that I'm putting my heart into.
That's phenomenal. Commissioner, thank you for the time today and your insight. You've left us with a lot, and we'll be following back up with you, but want to be very supportive of you. You've got a phenomenal team on your staff and at the agency, and we appreciate the work you do and they do for all of Texas. Any closing thoughts for our members before we let you go?
No, just I think it's for the industry itself, it's time we look in the mirror and reflect. And I encourage us, I think it's time that we put on our big boy and girl britches and decide we've got a battle on hand. And it's time we come to the table, come together and work together to make sure we defend this gift God has given the state of Texas that makes us different, that makes us more independent. And he's provided that. And we need to be good stewards of that. Our future generations will look back on us as the one that dropped the ball. And I don't intend to be that to be our history.
Good, good. Well, Commissioner, thank you. And if we don't see you soon, have a Merry Christmas, and we'll catch up in the new year.
Same to you. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Commissioner Christian can be found on the web at christianfortexas.com and on social media. And thank you again to Noble Royalties for being our sponsor today. We ask that you look to Noble Royalties as you consider your business needs for your family or company. If you are interested in sponsoring future events, we want to hear from you. Thank you again for joining us. Please be sure to fill out the exit survey so we can make these events even better. Have a great day. Thank you.